Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Parishscope, the podcast that deals with the news of St. John's Lutheran Church, Sam Prairie. I'm Pastor Chris Sansom.
And I'm Casey Dreamus, the contemporary music specialist.
I'll
go with specialist this week.
Yeah. I like that. I like your title. It's like a flowing title. It just kind of changes, week to week. We got to come up with a new title.
Yeah.
Something, somehow.
I've gone with Guy the last few weeks, and I probably need to sound slightly more official than that.
Well, I mean, with a progressive title like that just changes and moves. I mean, Who knows? Maybe next week you'll be director.
That's right. Hey, there we go.
Oh, yeah. We're all over this one. Different titles, different days. I absolutely love it.
Now, just while we're going, I'll just start the first thing because So I didn't realize when we brought up this story a few weeks ago about, or maybe it was last week, the Taylor Swift and
Kelsey. Yeah.
I didn't realize because I don't know football players by name.
Oh yeah.
But then when I saw a picture, I'm like, oh, that guy. He went to the Super Bowl last year. Like he's credited as like the greatest tight end of the league currently. And there's this TikTok trend right now where girlfriends or wives or whoever will go to, if their boyfriend or husband is a huge NFL fan, they'll be like, isn't this so nice that she took this like nobody and turned him in? And they're losing their minds because they're like, he's the greatest. I'm going to say the wrong linebacker in the NFL right now. And they're like, no, like people didn't even know who he was. And they're like, he went to the Super Bowl last year. Like they're freaking out.
Yeah.
And the videos are pretty funny. Like, they're like, isn't it so nice for Taylor Swift? And his sales are going up. And they're like, yeah, he's already famous. And they're like, no, he wasn't. And they're like, so just thought that was funny.
Yeah. But I mean, to be honest, again, it is wild to again think about, and I realize like this is why Taylor Swift comes up all the time because we're always like talking about like the impact and just overall like she just puts on a good show, but at the same time it's like I think I don't think I personally read it, but somebody mentioned this. I mean, they were reading an article and they said something like football is watched by approximately 17 million people every week. Mm-hmm. When Taylor Swift showed up, it popped up to like 22, 23 million.
Yeah.
Like, that's noticeable.
Yeah. The Chiefs' sales have gone up, too.
Yeah, the sales of Kelsey.
She might be there.
The sales of Kelsey jerseys are up to 400%.
Yeah, that's just nuts.
It is just crazy. And, the joke is always like, well, this is great for his career, and then the breakup's going to be great for hers.
Yeah, right.
So, she'll write more songs about it.
Exactly, yeah. It's just funny, but I thought that was worth mentioning because, I don't recognize the names of any football players.
Oh, yeah.
But once I saw the face, I'm like, because he has a brother who was in on the other team in the Super Bowl last year, and his brother plays bari saxophone. I don't know if anybody.
I did not know that.
He when he got his big first NFL check, he went over and bought like a really nice bari saxophone because he played in high school and he always wanted to do bari, so he bought one. And then there's some videos of him playing with like high school jazz bands in Philadelphia. Just this big giant football player coming in and playing the saxophone with him. It's pretty cool. So.
There you go. Tying it all in. Bringing Taylor Swift in right at the beginning.
Well, I figure we might as well because people seem to like it.
Right at the beginning. Taylor Swift. All over the place. Actually, in terms of current event, I realize, like, we're joking around with Taylor Swift and everything else, and all of a sudden I'm going to switch over to, like, a super serious topic. Yeah. But unfortunately, that's just the way it goes, right?
Yeah, it is.
One of the things I actually wanted to talk about, because it's getting a lot of attention right now, and that's the migrant crisis that we actually have. So for those of you that just, I don't know, don't pay attention to news at all, and God bless you, I get it. Yeah. We have a bit of a migrant crisis on our border. Now, depending on which news source you listen to, depending on who you listen to, some people will say it's because we have basically terrible procedures, a kind of a terrible system in place. It's a broken system. Biden didn't, create that system. He's just trying to adhere to it. You have other people on the other side of the aisle that pretty much say, look, when Trump was president, there was hardly anybody coming through, and now there's people pouring through, and they really are pouring through. But I think the reason I want to bring that up is because it does bring up a lot of really good questions in terms of as Christians, how are we to be? How are we to respond to all this? And this is, again, in a lot of ways, I think where things can get real dicey in terms of like, well, if Christ tells us, to befriend the person who's traveling, if scriptures tell us, if the Old Testament talks about how, hey, if you have somebody traveling through your land, you need to be kind to them and nice to them. Then the question comes, well, should we close our borders? And is it that Christian thing to do to close our borders? And can we as Christians say that we need to close our borders? But on the flip side, obviously there's a lot of Christians that do believe we need to close our borders as a country. And how do they defend that? And on top of that, you can kind of even go further in that, like, well, how as Christians should we act throughout this whole thing? And so there's a lot of theology that kind of gets thrown around a lot here. And so one of the things that I wanted to do tonight was actually kind of dissect that a little bit and talk about it, because it's all over the place, right? It's everywhere. And so it is a timely topic. First off, I think one of the things that we need to separate is the difference between the nation of Israel in the ancient times versus America. There is a distinction. There is a difference, right? God called his chosen people. They are the nation. They were the nation of Israel. God blessed them. At times they did wrong, and then he took them into exile, and then he brought them back. But he always did it with the nation. They had a king. They had several kings actually throughout the lineage, and so on and so forth. And so when we read a text that talks about how to run a country, we need to make sure that we're actually reading the text for what it says. Because is it, as I say, there are some people that will make this distinction. Is the text prescriptive or is it descriptive? That is to say, is the text telling us what to do or is it describing what happened?
Interesting, yeah.
Because there's times in scriptures where it's just telling us what happened.
Right.
Not to say that it doesn't have any theological impact. It kind of does, but it's still just describing here's what happened. Right. Sometimes people in the Bible do bad things. It's not telling us that we need to do bad things.
Yeah.
It's telling us that people did bad things. But on the same front, that's not necessarily one of these cases, but it is one of those cases where it's describing the nation of Israel. And this really hits on a nerve for a lot of people, because you get verses like Jeremiah 29, I think it's verse 11. Right? I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans for you to prosper and not for to fail. And everybody goes, oh, look, see, that's God saying that, he's got plans for me. And they're all good plans. And then if bad things happen, they go, what happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. That was the prophet Jeremiah talking to a group of people that were in exile.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't pull anything from that verse, but you can't look at that verse and then say, "Oh, well, God wants me to prosper and be wealthy." Like that's not what the Bible's saying. The Bible is saying that Jeremiah came to these people, and this is what he said to them, because God did have plans for those people to come back to their nation, for the exile to end, and for them to reestablish the nation of Israel. God did have plans for them to prosper, for sure. Now, we could say God definitely has plans for us. He has plans for us to be in heaven for all of eternity. But what we can't say is that if we go out in Jesus' name, that everything is going to be good and we're going to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. In fact, Jesus says we're probably going to suffer by his name, or for his name, I guess we should say. Well, the same here, right? We're talking about the nation of Israel. As it is, and we can go to Romans 13 and we could talk about how Paul tells us that nations have soared for a reason. In the country of America, we have the right to vote. We have the right as citizens to play a role in that governing bodies, which means we can have opinions. And the Bible doesn't specify, you have to have this opinion or that opinion. You can, believe it or not, you can be a good and well-meaning Christian and believe. And I don't think any Democrat believes this, like on the extreme side of anything.
Right.
They do not believe that our borders should be completely open for anyone and everyone.
Right.
I don't think, I even think they're like, whoa, no.
I think there's some young people out there who they don't, they hear things in the news, or they'll say something like that, like, I don't understand why we even have borders. And it's like, okay, well, but again, it's more younger people who I think just really don't understand why having a border is important, But
yeah.
Anyway,
but again, I mean, to the point though, is like, you can still be a Christian and believe that we shouldn't have borders. I would disagree with you. And again, I've said this on the show before. Like, I do have a little bit of a bias. I do lean a little bit to the right from a political system. But we're not talking about me and where I stand politically. We're talking about Christianity, and from a Christian state, you can actually believe that we should have open borders, or you can believe that we should have closed borders. That is a choice from a political standpoint of how you believe the governing bodies should run and they should do things.
Yeah.
But what do you do when the person who is in need, be it migrant, homeless person, or just somebody else that you happen to know, is right in front of you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now that's different.
Yes.
That's different. The Bible is very, very clear. When we have people that are in need in front of us, it is our Christian duty to help them. Mm-hmm. Now don't get me wrong, like we have families too, and we have to guard and protect those families. We're not called to put ourselves in horrible, horrible danger, just for the sake of anybody or everybody. Although there are some people that are called to do that,
Yeah.
We can think of soldiers and other things like that. But not all of us are, and you're certainly not necessarily called to place your family in danger, but you are called to help that person to the best of your means that you can in that moment, at that time. Now that topic does actually expand quite a bit. You can say, well, I have $50 extra. If I spend $100, I can't pay my bills. And if I can't pay my bills, I can't take care of my family, and so on and so forth. And all those decisions are absolutely applicable. You got to judge that and weigh that as you go. Because, especially if you're an adult, guess what? You're called by God to be an adult. And whether it's just a spouse or whether it's a spouse and your children, you have other people that you have to work with and help with and take care of. And so you have to actually allow their what they think and their safety and their well-being to be in play as well.
Right.
Which is why it's also okay, by the way, to lock your doors at night. Highly recommended.
Yeah. It is good too. Yeah. I don't know. It is very interesting to to some degree, because it does change a little bit, because when you're face to face with somebody, I think that's true of a lot of issues that us as Christians face, is like when we're face to face with someone who's of the, opposite political or religious belief, we're never justified in like, well, you have the right to take out a sword and strike them down. That's not something we, it's different. I guess it's different when there's harm, involved. If they're trying to harm you, there's difference. But but I don't, when I hear people who aren't Christians talk about Christians, they tend to have this viewpoint of like, they're just mean, awful people. And I'm like, I don't ever see that. I mean, you can have an opinion or think, well, I don't believe in this, but I wouldn't do this myself. But, they're face to face with someone who has a different belief than them. They're not, I've never seen anybody like start roughing them up or, or anything like that.
I think it's just like anything. Like, you have bad apples, right? I mean, I know the big name that everybody used to know is the Westboro Baptist Church.
Oh yeah.
And that's not a knock on Baptists. That was a very specific Westboro Baptist group. They used to go to like funerals and like heckle people and hold signs, and it was
horrible stuff.
They were uncaring. They were really, and again, I don't know any of them personally, but just from what I've seen videos of, they seemed like they were really mean-spirited and and not necessarily nice people, but they called themselves Christians.
Yeah.
So you have bad apples, and you have certain, I guess you'd say branches or churches that are Christian that are bad apples. But by and large, those that are reading through Holy Scripture and saying, okay, what does Holy Scripture actually command me to do? By and large, what I have seen politically happen more and more is that people tend to tie the hands of the Christians based on political fervor and not the other way around. I'm not saying that doesn't ever happen the other way, but like, so for instance, I remember when Obama was president and there was that whole basically birth control mandate in the insurance program.
Yeah.
And it was a big debate. And again, this is one of those, regardless of how you feel that debate should go, whether you believe it firmly should be in there or whether you believe it firmly shouldn't, and that's fine. Have that debate.
Yeah.
But there was this one group, Holy Sisters of the Poor, that were I think they were out of New York, and they ran a soup kitchen, and the government shut them down.
Oh, wow.
Because their insurance refused to cover birth control because they were nuns.
Right, yeah.
And so the insurance said no. Well, and at first the argument was, well, they're grandfathered in, and then it was something else, and it became this big political, argument, and it became high profile, which is part of the reason I even know about it. But this happened all over the place.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like, soup kitchens were shut down because of things like this, and that was a political thing that ended up basically hurting poor people.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if others came along to open up a soup kitchen, but these nuns, and I think that's one of the things. I know this is a tangent. This is a complete tangent. But if you ever study like missiology and the history of mission work, one of the things that I think is rarely ever discussed is actually how much mission work the Catholic Church did pre-Reformation, especially pre-Reformation, but even post-Reformation, probably up until the 1700s. Like, and most of it was done not by the Catholic Church, like the regular jamokes, doing stuff, the blacksmith, and no, it was always the monks and the nuns. And there is something about that. The monks and the nuns really. They were just kind of like, okay, I'll go. And then they'd go, and they're like, well, if I die, I die. It's like, And, I mean, and again, that's where, you get some of these really bold stories. Like, I think it's St. Francis of Assisi that did that, the tree. I'm trying to think, again, if anybody wants to, read up and say, no, Pastor Chris, that was somebody else. I'll be like, okay. I will readily admit I don't have this, right here. I'm not like reading a book, but I believe it was St. Francis of Assisi that went and cut down the tree. There was a group of people in I think it was Germany or some part of Europe that worshipped a tree, and St. Francis of Assisi said, well, you know what? If your tree god doesn't like me, he can strike me down. And then he went and cut down the tree. Yeah. And everybody just watched him. It's just that bold maneuver. And yeah, it's like, up until about the 1700s, really, I mean, I don't want to say all, but a massive chunk of mission work was done by the Catholics, or actually, I shouldn't even say Catholics, because there are monasteries. We actually have Lutheran monasteries. We have not many, admittedly so. There's some reasons for that. We could talk about that at some point, but there are some. There are some Eastern Orthodox monasteries. And so on and so forth. But it was basically monks, monks and nuns, people that said, you know what, I'm going to devote my life over here. I'm going to devote my life to God. And then they would just go venture off and, And so, it's just kind of one of those, I know that's a side tangent there, but I mean, it is really kind of a fascinating topic. Anybody that ever wants to study missiology, oh man, it's a fun topic. And not fun all at the same time.
Yeah, well, studying for some people is fun, and for others,
okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
You're definitely someone who enjoys studying, I will say. Yeah. And I enjoy studying certain things, but other things not so much.
Well, fair. I think that's for everybody, though, right?
That's probably, yeah.
Well, I mean, again, I think the important thing is just to lay out that format for exactly how we as Christians should handle it. I think for me that's what's important, because a lot of times people get caught up and they think that the church is telling them how to vote one way or the other.
Right.
And if I'm truly honest, there are some issues that maybe we wish people voted in a certain direction. But even that, it's rarely as black and white as, oh, you got to vote this way or you got to vote this way. Again, and I think that's the important thing that I want to draw out. Like, look, you can be a Christian and still believe in wildly open borders. Again, I'm going to disagree with you, and I think there's a lot of good, rational, logical arguments that would flow against that. However, that being said, you can certainly think that. The real thing has to do with what do you do when the person is in need in front of you. Mm-hmm. And that's the important part that we as Christians really need to cling on to. Yeah. And I think sometimes we fail to do that because, like, what happens? Like you're driving down the street and, you happen to run across somebody who is here illegally. Yeah. What do you do if the person is in need? Well, you have two options. Some people would be disgusted because they're here illegally. They shouldn't be here. We should have closed borders. And again, that's all politics. But as Christians, what we should be saying is that person in need? Do they need help in some way? Right. And how can they get help? Yeah. Do they need food? Well, is there a food shelter around? Can I call somebody? Is there some other place? Can I advise them to go over here? Can I, how can I alleviate some issue? Now, one thing is important also to put out, and this is one of those things where, again, we can go really deep down a rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. But for anybody that's ever read the book Until It Hurts or Toxic Charity by Robert Lipton, I forgot the person who wrote Until It Hurts, but Toxic Charity by Robert Lipton is another great source. And it talks about how, like, when I say helping somebody, I don't mean taking from them what they can do themselves. And I think that's maybe the best way to put that. You cannot take from somebody what they can do themselves. To do that is a kind of almost like a type of thievery.
So can you give an example what they mean by that?
They did years and years ago. There was a mission group that went over to Africa. They had a desperate need for a clean water system. Mm-hmm. And so they installed the water system, they installed the water tower, they did all the work. They decided as a mission trip what they were going to do is they were going to come back to that village every year. Well, they came back that first year, everything was in disrepair. And they took the time and the energy to fix the water tower and to fix the water system. Mm-hmm. And then they came back every year, and they did the same thing every year. They had to fix the water tower, fix the water system. And finally, after it was like 10 or 15 years. Again, I don't have the book in front of me, so, bear with me. I don't know how many years it was. One of the people finally got up the nerve to actually ask the people, this isn't rocket science. Why don't you guys fix the water tower? And they said, why would we? You're going to come back next year and do it. Yeah. And so it became one of those things where over time, the people quit doing that which they could do, and instead they just waited for somebody else to do it. Now, that's one side of it. The other side of it is, and actually this is really, really interesting, but where they've gone into inner cities and done huge food pantries, support systems for everything, usually within 2 or 3 generations, you have more single mother homes and no fathers, or the fathers are gone. And part of the reason that, I know, again, I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but
this is interesting.
But what it is men are wired in such a way as providers. Now, again, we can go deep in this particular topic has all kinds of spider webs, you might say, that kind of go off all over the place. But I'm not going to go into any of those. But guys in general are wired in such a way that we want to provide for our homes. And so whenever they went into these inner cities and they said, okay, what do these people need? And they got all these things together. They got all the clothes, they got all the food, and they just started giving it away. What happens is the guys feel a huge amount of shame. Mm-hmm. And so much so that they begin to get to this point where they can't even look their families in the eyes. Yeah. And so they experience that and then they leave. Mm. And after a while, you develop this culture where that becomes the norm.
Yeah.
At first they're kind of like, they're shamed if they stay home and they're shamed if they leave. And so they find that they can leave and suck it up a little bit better, I guess.
Right.
The women in this case have no shame. Like they just like, we're hungry. Our kids are hungry. We need to eat. We're going to go do this. It's not about shame or anything for them. They just need to get what needs to be done. Mm-hmm. But what they found is within a few generations, there's a lot more single mother homes, specifically single mother homes.
Yeah.
And that this cycle then kind of perpetuates. What they're starting to do to kind of fix this is they're actually starting like co-ops.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically they're going into some of these inner city places and they're saying, look, if you want food, we'll give you food, but you got to come and work for so many hours.
Yeah.
And then after you work for so many hours, we'll give you food.
Yeah.
And then what they're finding is that, again, I can't remember how many years ago this book was written, but what they're finding is that in situations where they do that, the men will actually come and work, and then they will take that box of food home to their family.
Yeah, probably.
And it's like, they got a sense like that they earned this. This is something that they do. And again, that's kind of hardwired into us. Now, I'm not saying you can't kind of defeat that hardwiring, and there are definitely a lot of people that try.
Yeah.
And again, we can talk about that till we're blue in the face. But ultimately, this is one of those scenarios where if you take something from somebody that they can do themselves,
yeah,
you are in a way kind of stealing something from them.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes here, right? If you have somebody who has an emergency, like their house burns down or something, right? Help them out. Do what you can.
Right.
But if you have somebody who basically just doesn't have a job and therefore can't get food, help them find a job.
Yeah.
Maybe give them a little bit of food here and there,
right.
but I'm not
what's
saying
the
leave
real
them.
problem.
Yeah, I'm not saying leave them high and dry, but help them find a job. And I understand, again, we're going to get into all kinds of political battles. Should they do this? Should they do that? But I'm not saying that. But like, look, they can. If somebody can do something on their own, we should not steal that from them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I think that's a really interesting topic though, because you get into, like for instance, I mean, I think I have somewhat of a unique stance because I'm a stay-at-home dad, which is not that there's lots of stay-at-home dads nowadays, but I also have like several part-time jobs. So
yes,
I still have that desire that I do want to help provide financially, and I'm luckily very blessed to be able to do that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a weird feeling, like I can understand when you don't feel like you're bringing anything to the table, and it's just easier not to do anything because you're just getting it provided for you. But it weighs on you eventually.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the whole teach a man to fish, or
absolutely.
Give a man fish, or what, that whole thing. Definitely. I don't know. It's interesting when you start getting into the political stuff because I mean, I lean more right typically.
Yeah.
And I've had one person in my life that we got talking one time, and he's a really nice guy, and he started saying that he's very left.
Yeah.
And he was raised Catholic. And so it's kind of like, oh, that's interesting because stereotypically I feel like a lot of people are right wing, at least around here. And he said, well, the reason I do is because we're supposed to provide for people, and how good of a Christian would I be if I wasn't like, thinking we need to have welfare and all this stuff. And he went into it, and the way he explained it and the way that he felt that represented Christianity, I was like, oh, I completely understand why you vote that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying I'm voting that way, but I totally get it because he really did connect it to his faith of like, this is what I really think, and I think this is the best way to help people. And it's like, to me, it's like, cool, I get it. I totally understand why you feel that way. I feel more on like kind of you got to teach a man to fish sort of thing, and so just giving immediate here's stuff. So again, I see multiple sides of it and why people feel that way. Yeah. But it was interesting just that he did connect it to his faith in a strong way to him. So
yeah, and I mean, again, I don't want to make this kind of a political thing, but at the same time, it's like, even from that standpoint, you can see the difference. Like this might be the difference between you have a group of people that's going into the city versus the government. Look, the government's the government. Mm-hmm. Like, right? You vote people into office that you think are going to do the same thing as what you would do, like the way you believe, or at least lean in your direction. And the same thing with this, all right? I mean, the government can choose to help people how the government wills, and hopefully they do it in such a way that you appreciate and enjoy. But at the same time, it's like even when they get that wrong, like the government's kind of a big beast to turn. But at the same time, like I wouldn't, even the stuff that we're talking about, like in terms of helping people, I am a firm believer that the church should have a very integral role in that. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm also a fan of a particular book on church leadership called Church Unique. And one of the things that book brings out is every church is uniquely placed, and therefore you have to find kind of your church's unique place. Mm-hmm. Not all churches can run the kind of co-op food pantry that I just described. Yeah. They're just not positioned for it. Yeah. We don't
have a bunch of people walking downtown Green Valley coming to St. John's.
Well, that's just it. If you're 20 miles out in the country, like, those people are going to spend more in gas to get the food that you're going to give them than they. I mean, so it doesn't work for everybody, and and then you also have different scenarios too. And I mean, this is where it means like you have to be able to think through some of this stuff. Yeah. Right, because there's a lot of scenarios that's going to be different. Like, what happens if I don't know. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head of examples. Yeah, but like, let's say your retirement ran out. I mean, I don't know how that really works. So maybe I don't know. But at the same, let's say your retirement works out and you go to the food pantry just to make kind of ends meet, mm-hmm. but you're beyond working age, so you really can't do a co-op anymore. I mean, so food pantries and stuff, they have their place.
Yeah, exactly.
They have their place. I'm not saying like the co-op thing is the only way to go. I'm just saying that is one thing to kind of think about as we think about what are the best ways to help people. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and again, who knows? Maybe if you see somebody on the side of the street, the best you can do is give them a gift card or direct them to a place where they can get a gift card. I don't know. I don't know what the scenarios are. I mean, this is where it gets really hard because, a lot of times I think people want you to just say, just tell me what to do. And it's like, well, no, that's too easy. Life is hard, and life has all kinds of scenarios, and we have to make the best judgment. And here's the thing. We're not going to get it 100% right. We're just not. And that's why God all too often gives us second chances where we can kind of come around and go, you know what? Last time I did this, it weighed on my conscience. I felt guilty about this. This time I think I should handle it like this. Mm-hmm. And we can kind of work on that. Yeah. We're not perfect.
Yeah. Well, some of us. No, I'm kidding.
Some of us aren't perfect, and then there's Casey.
No, I'm just kidding. There's no dumb questions.
No dumb questions.
No dumb questions.
One of these days we're going to get like theme music and stuff.
We really do. I know. I keep thinking we need to do that.
I was actually looking for my cable tonight. I couldn't find it. I have a laptop and I have a cable that will connect it to that. Couldn't find it. Couldn't find the cable. Computer's just fine.
Yeah, we'll have to.
One day.
We'll get there. We'll get there someday.
One day, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have fantastic music. It's going to be awesome.
It'll be amazing.
It's going to be amazing.
But so here's my question. It's harvest season.
It's harvest season.
Harvest season. And a lot of the Bible, especially I would say I don't want to speak too matter-of-factly because I don't feel confident enough to do that. But a lot of, Jesus's talk or parables and talking has a lot of his talking. That's a real technical term there. His talk. All of Jesus is talking.
His talking.
is a lot of analogies or metaphors for farming. Because a far majority of people were farmers.
Yeah.
So when we start looking at translating like the Bible, which of course has been done before, but when you start looking at some of these stories, what's like, especially as you've actually really studied, in other languages and other things like that, translating it to like the modern day for people who aren't farmers, our church specifically has a lot of farmers, so maybe this really is a dumb question, but how easy is it really to translate those stories into something that maybe is more personal to other people? And is that okay to do, or is it like,
I think it's okay to do as long as you understand. I mean, not just the story, but actually kind of what's going on. Like, you need to understand some of the history that's behind it. So for instance, there's a disconnect. There's, what is it? I can't think of his name. D.A. Carson, a famous kind of exegete theologian. Unfortunately, not LCMS. We're working on it, guys. But but he has this one book, and it's a fancy little book. It's called Exegetical Fallacies, and he basically goes through all these like exegetical flaws or faux pas that people sometimes do. One of the great examples that he uses is dynamite.
Okay.
So dynamite uses a Greek term. The Greek term is dynamis, means powerful, ability. However, it doesn't mean explosive. It just means powerful or mighty. And so with that, you see preachers everywhere going, every time they see that word in Greek, they're like, yeah, see what Jesus means here is explosive, And it's like, well, no. See, what they're doing is they're taking the modern day version of that word and they're trying to force that definition into the background.
Right.
Same thing with farming, right? We see these guys with these massive tractors, massive combines, hundreds, thousands of acres sometimes.
Yeah.
Growing this basically this seed that, is amazing. And they're precision planting, they're precision fertilizing, they got weed control. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it's not a lot of hard work. It is incredible.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of work. But they do a lot of work and they reap a massive amount of product by comparison to what they were producing in the ancient world.
Right.
In the ancient world, it was a lot more self-sufficient. You raised animals, and yes, sometimes you were able to take them to market and maybe get some money for that. I'm not saying they didn't do anything for money, but by and large, they were eating the food that they made.
Right.
So they would farm, but then they would eat the vegetation that they produced. And if you went to the town of Galilee, there was a lot of people in Galilee, and yes, they would also catch fish and sell fish, but they would also eat fish. Because that's what they did, and so a large part of their fishing was just sustenance to survive, and then they would sell extra to get whatever else they could not get from that sense. But again, the same thing. If you were in a small village, or even actually for us, probably what we would consider a small village would be a great big village for them.
Right.
I mean, Green Valley with 400, 500 people would be absolutely huge. In the ancient world. We just don't think about that, but it'd be huge. But a lot of times they were short on acreage, but they would have a craft or a skill that they would sell. But a lot of times they were raising animals and planting grains and stuff so that they could survive. They were eating it. This was their ability to eat. And once you understand that, a lot of things seem a lot better. Now, again, that's not always the case. I mean, if you go back to the story of Ruth and Boaz, I mean, Boaz seemed like a pretty well-to-do farmer. He seemed to have a lot more land, and even had people like working for him and all this kind of stuff. And I think the other part of that, though, is that they did a lot more processing on their own. And a lot of that is stuff that we just don't think about nowadays. As some of you know, I like to grind up my own wheat. And one of the local farmers was gracious enough to give me some wheat that he had harvested. I literally got it straight out of the 18-wheeler, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And but here's the thing, that's straight out of the field. I got to clean that. There's a lot of chaff that comes with it, a lot of stuff that I have to let the wind take away, and then I have to soak it and have some of it float to the top, and then I gotta, it's a whole process to clean this wheat and get it ready to go. In the ancient world, they did that too. In fact, this is the whole thing with Boaz. He's on the chafing ground, and he's fluffing the wheat up in the air so that the wind will catch the chaff and blow it away.
Oh.
And so that's actually what he's doing is he's tossing the wheat up in the air. The wheat is heavy. The wheat will fall back down to the ground. But the chaff, the stuff he doesn't want, will blow away with a good breeze.
Yeah.
So
now can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Because I really honestly never thought about the fact of just farming is not just to sell or make money, but to survive yourself, sustain yourself.
Yeah.
So when I'm trying to think of how I want to say this, but like when you're relating that to things as a Christian, how does that sort of change? I mean, us as Christians, when you're reading stuff about Jesus saying, "Go out and sow and all those things for God's kingdom," and so how does that relate to sort of like the farmer just trying to survive? Like that's their means of surviving.
Well, and to be honest with you, that's actually a really good question, but it also enables you to see two things. First of all, it allows you to see the comedy that Jesus brings to the table.
Yeah.
And it also allows you to see the seemingly, and oh man, I'm going to get chastised for this one. I am. I just
all right, go for it.
But I can't think of another word. In the parables, you see almost a sense of recklessness.
Oh man.
So again, take the parable of the what is it? The four kinds of earth, or So a man goes out to sow, right? Now remember, these are all farmers. Seed's expensive. You don't waste it. You don't muck around with it. You plant it
because you could die
because it could hurt you. It could mean the end of at the very least your business venture, but quite possibly you'll go hungry in the winter and have to live off your neighbors. You don't want any of that. So so this is really important stuff. And this guy goes out here and he just starts tossing seed all over the place. Like he's out of control.
Yeah.
He's tossing it on the road. He's tossing it on the rocks.
How reckless.
How reckless. But I mean, you see the comedy here. A bunch of people are envisioning this story of this man going out to sow who's absolutely a madman.
Yeah.
And who's just tossing stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
He's just tossing it everywhere. And the stuff that falls in the rocks, it grows up, but then it withers and dies, and the stuff in the weeds, it grows up and it's choked out by the weeds. The stuff in the road, the birds come and get it, but then some of it falls on the good soil and it grows. But I mean, the whole premise of this parable right at the beginning is absolute madness.
Yeah.
To a group of people who very well understood what it meant to be a farmer in the ancient world.
Right.
Is absolutely insane. And then the disciples approach Jesus and say, "What was that all about?" And Jesus is like, "Yeah, well, that's the word of the Lord. God is here giving us his word, and he's just throwing it everywhere.
Yeah.
He's just throwing it everywhere. And some people, they have faith, but world comes and they wither and die. It's like It's
you don't think Jesus turned to him and was like, well, you got to have a good hook,
Yeah, right. No. That was what Jesus was concerned about.
Yeah, it's like, well, you got to draw him in with something. So.
You got to have something to draw him in. Yeah.
I don't know. That's sparking thoughts in my head because, like, for instance, so I don't know if you'd call it profession, but, music has been a thing I studied and did in college, and then, obviously working for the church and everything like that. But I hate the word obviously. I hate when I have a pet peeve about the word obviously. But I play for church, and then I also run my own band, which to me, relating this story to me, that's like my survival.
Yeah.
Not that I don't like playing for church, but it really is like I just love playing, and that's really my providing for myself just to enjoy what I'm doing. And
now here's the thing: as a good Lutheran,
yes,
we would say that's your vocation.
My vocation,
and it comes from this Latin voca, which means to call. It's your calling.
So, music, just in general.
Not just in general. So the idea of vocation is this: throughout your life, throughout your world, you have several callings, and your job as a Christian is to do those callings to the best of your natural ability. That's what you're called to do. And so, but you have several callings, right? One of your callings is a husband, right? You're married, you have a wife, you have the calling that's very specific, but you're also a father.
Yeah.
So that's part of your calling. But you're also a band director, and you're also, whatever, all these things. And these are all your various callings. But you are called as a Christian to kind of do this to the best of your abilities. To bring back up that same analogy that I think we used a while back, when the shoemaker comes up to Luther,
right,
and he says, "Should I put little crosses on the shoes?" Luther says, "No. Just make really, really, really good shoes."
Yeah.
And that's kind of the whole point of that, right? As Christians, our good works are not for God. God doesn't need our good works. He just doesn't. Like he is the creator of all there is, was, and ever shall be. He does not need our good. He's not up in heaven going, "Boy, I hope he does really good. Otherwise, I'm sunk."
Yeah.
He's
I got a
God,
lot riding on this one.
Right? He is God. He doesn't need your good works. And even when you give him your good works, they're almost always laced with sin anyway. And so they're not really all that good.
Right.
But God has redeemed you through Christ. And because he has redeemed you through Christ and you put your faith in Christ, that means your good works are free. They're free. And they're free for somebody else. Now, you don't want to be selfish about them.
Right.
Because that would just be a whole other issue. So you give your good works away. And who do you give them to? Well, where are you called? And so if you're called to be a husband, you give your good works to your wife. If you're called to be a father, you give your good works to your children. If you're called to be a band director, you give your good works by doing the best job you can do as a band director. Even if it doesn't gain you anything.
Yeah.
You're not doing this to further your career. You're not doing this because you want to make a bunch of extra money. You're doing this because you're a band director, and that's where you have been called to be, and therefore you're going to just do the best job that you can do.
Yeah.
Every Christian who goes to work in the morning, there should be bosses lined up going, "Man, I hope I hire a Christian. They do the best work."
Yeah.
I wish I could say that was true.
Yeah.
It's not. But that's, if we really want to say, hey, how have we been called today? That's where we've been called. We've been called to work and do the best job that we can. Now, again, I understand it gets more complicated than that. But at the same time, like in a basic sense, like that's where we've been called. So, yeah. Boy, I'm just going off on all kinds of tangents tonight.
No, but it is interesting. And I've always, with my band, I have a band of 20 people. And I've always viewed it on the sense of, of course it's for me too. Like I enjoy doing it, but
sure.
I also view it, and I think this is because of my Christian upbringing, as I'm providing a place for these people to play. And that's not me trying to pat myself on the back or anything, but I really try to view it as like I'm working for them so that they can have a new song to play this week, or they can have this and we can all enjoy it together. And
absolutely.
That's how I was raised. So.
But again, that's, in terms of this idea of vocation, and that's what we're talking about, vocation. Like, we've all been called to various stages of life, and our job is to do the best job that we can do. Now, again, we can go deep into this, and we could talk about, look, it doesn't do you any good to work 90 hours a week and then you're just completely, dead to the world. You're exhausted. You can't do it. No. You got to do some self-care in there too.
Yeah.
But even that, like, notice how you do that. You can't continually work your best if you never take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself so that when you do go to your job, you can do the best job you can do. You do have to do some self-care so that you can be the best husband that you can be, the best father that you can be, and some of that's going to be required of you need to take your own rest and your own time off.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to move on to our next section now at this point. We're still on the 10 Commandments, and we're going to keep on trucking through them. Tonight's commandment, I sound like Sesame Street, don't I? Tonight's commandment
is brought to you by Mystic Monk Coffee.
Yeah, that's right, Mystic Monk Coffee.
No,
and Taylor,
sorry, that's like Prices Right.
And Taylor Swift Eras Tour.
Yes.
But no, we're on the 5th commandment. Thou shalt not murder. You shall not murder, which is always a obvious one, right?
Yeah. This one, would you say there's gray area in this, or?
So actually, yes, there is. I mean, on the one hand, no, there's not. On the other hand, yeah, there is. And that's just because a lot of times when we think about this, and again, as human beings, we have a tendency to think that our thoughts are our own and our actions are usually what get us into trouble, right? It's not what we think, it's what we do. Well, God differs. He doesn't agree. Basically, God even says, hey, if you hate somebody, guess what? You still, if you hate that person, you have still murdered them in your heart. You have murdered them in your heart.
Oh, man.
And that means, like, even hatred.
Oh, man.
Even hatred.
That's a real letdown.
Right, isn't it?
One of the few things in my life I take a lot of pride in is that I can hold a grudge pretty much to my grave. You know? No, I'm just kidding. Going off on tangent, but what's strange is that, there's somebody, I won't get in detail who, but a relative of one of our families that they still have a lot of resentment for, like, people in high school.
Yeah.
Like, they brought it up a while back and just, like, really, really torn up about things that people did. And honestly, it was just like, well, they kind of drifted apart. And that was kind of it. It wasn't like they did this big horrible thing at prom and, like, embarrassed them. It was just like, well, they kind of went off with a different friend group, and that really hurt me. And I get, I understand in the moment it hurts you, but I've kind of, there's people that I didn't necessarily get along with, but I don't have hatred towards, or, like, I hope bad things upon them,
Yeah. So, okay, so I will actually talk about that a little bit. So from the theological side of things, obviously we shouldn't hold on to grudges. And as you can tell, right, and if you've ever met anybody that really holds on really tightly to grudges, it usually hurts them more than it hurts the person that they're holding a grudge on to. I mean, no, God has called us to forgiveness. Now, over the last couple of days, we've actually had our CID, our Central Illinois District conference. And one of our speakers, Dr. Reed Lessing, has actually talked a little bit about this. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but, one of the things that he's like, look, forgiveness is not, emotional healing. Forgiveness is not forgetting that the sin ever happened. Forgiveness, and he kind of goes through this whole list. And I think that's actually important too, right? We don't necessarily have to forget that something ever happened. Like, that's just not smart.
Oh, yeah.
But we do have to forgive, and that means to let go of that animosity and those things that we have for that. Now, that being said, I will also say that, in terms of emotional healing, I think emotional healing is very important, and it's something that doesn't really get a whole lot of credence in today's, I hate to say this, but especially among men. Men are too masculine.
Are we getting into some sissy stuff, Chris? Come on,
we are.
Let's just suck it up. Come on.
Yeah. But one of the interesting things is like they've done, they've done like these studies, and they've done, a lot of counselors will say that, basically you deal with your emotions, or you deal with this kind of weakness that you'll have later on. Something that something that you just, it hurt you in a moment, and you just tried to bury it, and then ultimately what happens is that leaves you weaker the next time, because something is going to happen to you again.
Right.
And then when it sparks that same feeling, it's like the pain is infinitely worse.
Yeah.
Because of that weakness that you left undealt with.
Right.
Because you decided to bury your emotions.
Yeah.
Like a real man.
Like a real man. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, and again, like, look, that's like psychology and grief counseling and all that kind of stuff.
And that's of the devil. So
I'm not gonna get into that on my theology podcast. But at the same time, it is very interesting to think about, like, why do people do what they do and act the way they act, and why do they do certain things?
Oh,
and I mean,
fascinates me to no end.
And I mean, look, we're armchair psychologists right now. I don't,
yeah,
we get, who knows the reasons behind some of these things, but at the same time, like, it is fascinating to think about, like, if you just bury all your emotions, it's going to come back. Like your body, your emotional content does not forget; it remembers. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's. Well, I feel like I'm 32, 33. I can't never remember. I know it's terrible, but I feel like I'm still to this. Like I feel like I'm making these sort of slight psychological breakthroughs every once in a while, where I'm just like I just kind of come to terms with something like, yeah, that's okay. I don't know. It's weird. It's I don't know.
Yeah,
it's just the more you get more insight to things,
and I think that just keeps going with age.
Yeah. I don't know. It's. Sorry, I could go on about psychology. I do like psychology. I don't know. I'm pretty good with psychology. I took sociology of developing cultures. So
you're pretty much a pro.
I'm pretty much a pro.
Pretty much a pro.
So, yeah,
man. Why didn't they just give you your PhD then?
I know,
right?
Yeah.
So back to the fifth commandment.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, murdering. Sorry. So hatred is not really. Well, that's part of it.
Yeah, you can't hate. You can't hate.
Darn it. Okay.
And by the way, and again, this is going on my. I think I'm going to start writing down my unpopular opinions. This is another unpopular opinion. I know when I was growing up, when I was a kid, I was taught like, okay, you can't hate the person, but you can like strongly dislike them.
You could really not want to be around them,
But at the end of the day, look, we can call hate whatever we want. It's still forbidden.
Yeah.
Now again, if you're picking up on this, and you're picking up on what Jesus is kind of throwing at us, one of the things that you'll begin to realize is that hate comes pretty darn naturally.
I'm very good at it, honestly. Yeah. I wish I wasn't. It's just part of it's in my DNA.
It is. It's a natural thing that we just do. It's part of our sinful nature. It just lunges. It goes. It's super easy to hate. It's super hard to say, you know what? I'm not going to hate, and I'm going to, and again, this commandment, if you read, Luther's explanation of it, you'll notice that he doesn't just say, oh yeah, and don't kill and don't hate people, but he actually says, no. In fact, as a Christian, you're called to help your neighbor. You're called to be there for your neighbor. You're called to help him in his bodily needs, right? If he needs something, you're called as a Christian. So not only do you not just, as the joke would go, not only do you not kill your neighbor, but you actually help them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now, I don't know how much this has. You'll have to tell me how much this has, if there's any theological.
Wait, are you going to talk about a time when you hated your neighbors?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, I could tell you one story.
Oh, no.
I was very into Power Rangers, as you know. Well, I shouldn't say was.
What?
My neighbors came over one day, asked if I was outside playing with my toys, and they said, can we play with you? I said, sure. They picked up one of the toys, broke the leg off of it, set it down, then they went inside.
Everybody, this was last week.
Yeah, this was but the thing is, you couldn't get a new one because it was a couple seasons ago. So it's that's it.
All she wrote.
I will say the moment this wasn't the moment, but my wife did, when we were dating, buy me. She went on eBay and found that exact action figure and bought it for me.
And that's how you knew there was love.
I knew it before that, but that was pretty
deep love.
But now, where was I going with this? Now that I'm on,
you were going to tell a story.
I was going to say, let's see, where were we? Oh gosh, this is my problem. I was going to go talk about if there's any. Oh yeah, is that I think something like my wife and I have discussed since we had kids was she feels like she really became a better teacher when she had kids, which I think a lot of people probably would agree who have kids and stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because, especially, not the school she's at currently, but one of the former schools she was at, there was a kid in her class that was a little difficult at times, and it was really frustrating. And then there was a day where his dad dropped him off, and his dad was outside in the parking lot slapping him in the face and screaming at him. And, you sit there and you go, okay, he's a little obnoxious in class. he lives with that every day. And then you start to kind of understand why he is that way.
Yeah.
And you start to you just start kind of having more sympathy. And even though he, was not perfect in class by any means, you just kind of start to understand. I think that's where, I had kind of a falling out with the guy in my band a few years ago. And it was really tough. It's probably one of the toughest, like, when you come to friendship things that ever happened. A lot of things were said, and I don't know. It's like I never really hated him because I understood he was not in a good place.
Mm-hmm.
So the things he said that really would hurt me, I kind of go, I know he means them right now, but I also know that he's not really in a good place.
Yeah.
So it kind of alleviated me from hating him, even though I think maybe when I was younger I probably would have.
Sure.
But
sure.
You start trying to understand the other people's side, and it changes things.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think it goes back to, like, when we talk about forgiveness, like, just remember, especially as we live in the real world, I think sometimes as Christians we need to remember that we are humans. That is to say, we're not God.
Right.
God forgives, and He forgives totally and completely. As human beings, this side of heaven, we're going to struggle with that. And, it's a good goal to strive towards. It's a good goal to work towards. But it's also something that we need to be realistic about and say, look, as a Christian, I need to forgive. We need to know that. We need to take that to God in prayer. We need to actually do work on making that happen. But at the same time, we also need to realize, like, if something horrible and horrific happens, like, we're probably not going to be able to forgive them by tomorrow. Like,
right.
It might be a couple days. It might be longer. It's going to take a little bit of time. But at some point, we're going to get to that place where we can kind of let go of that animosity and that hatred that we have. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things that we got to keep in mind is that that's still, even though, yes, and again, I know, but even though, I'm saying, hey, let's cut ourselves some slack, and I think that's important to say, we need to realize, like, that hatred that's developing in our heart is sinful. Mm-hmm. It is sinful.
Yeah.
We still take it to Jesus, and we still recognize that because we're sinners, because we can't forgive immediately on the spot, mm-hmm. that we are sinners. We are absolutely pitiful sinners. Absolutely. And we need Jesus. And that's kind of a huge part of that, right? We need Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's an important thing to realize, like even as we go through these commandments, but it also is nice to know that we are called as Christians not just to not kill our neighbor. And again, I know that's kind of funny when you say it, but it just is. But at the same time, we're called not to just not kill them, but also to actually help them and support them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually an important thing too. Like, how are your neighbors doing? And I know your neighbors are everybody, but even if you want to narrow it down, like, how's the person living next to you doing?
Yeah.
So yeah. So yeah, I think it's an important topic to talk about, of course. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, are we on to?
Are we? Is it time? Is it time for church?
We probably better get to it, or else we're going to run out. I guess. Because there's a timer if we go.
Yeah.
Past
man, we don't want to do that.
We can just shut down.
Oh, it'll be rough. Okay, so it's time for church chatter. Okay, here we are, church chatter for the week. I'm going to say something right now. It was really interesting. What was it? I think it was just last week. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. Like, I've been so busy that I'm losing track of time, and it's kind of scary. But I think it was like either Wednesday or Thursday. There was a group of ladies at church, and they were folding I think it's the Parishscope that went out. The Parishscope proper.
You
the
mean
news.
The thing we deal with on the podcast?
On the podcast. Anyway, they were folding the printed copy of the Parishscope before this. And those gals were talking and asking so many questions. I think I even told them, I was like, I need you guys for church chatter, because like this is where they were asking, because I guess there were some guys working on the roof, and I was like, yeah, there's some guys, and I was like, I never thought about that. Yeah, there's some guys up there,
withholding information.
I'm withholding stuff from everybody. But yeah, they were asking about that. They were asking, so it's just so funny. But yeah, and that's always the thing too. Like, look, guys, the church is so packed with stuff. Like it doesn't make. There are days whenever it's just Mitzi, Bill, and I in the office, but that is not normal. Like, almost always somebody else is around. Yeah. Stuff is happening. Today was food pantry day. We talked about food pantries. Our ladies that do the food pantry for our church, they do awesome, and they do all of this work for our food pantry and the way it all works, and they just do great. And you know what? I don't know how many people showed up today, but I mean, there's a lot of people. And I mean, that just shows you that even in our community, we have such a need. Yeah. And so food pantry was today. A lot of work went into that. So yeah, we have stuff like that going on. I mean, of course, we can always look ahead. That's what we've been doing last couple of weeks. LWML Sunday's coming up. Not this Sunday, Casey.
I know. What's funny is that there have been several people who have told me, like, hey, don't forget to wear purple. I'm like, oh, I'm on the up and up.
You're wearing purple.
I know, because we do church chatter. So
church chatter. So wear purple, not this Sunday, but next Sunday.
Right.
And then, of course, toward the end of the month on October 29th, we have our Fall Fest. Also, our voters meeting, by the way. If you ever want to find out all the stuff going on at church, even the finances and all that kind of stuff, as a member, you can come to our voters meeting. I think it takes a session or two before you're actually a voting member. But you can read our Constitution, because we all have one, right? We have a Constitution.
Right.
So all our laws and bylaws. But anyway, so you can come to such a thing, and it'll be 7 p.m. at night on the 29th. And then we kind of have this like a concert. We have a concert filled with a lot of hymnody, and we actually got like a guest coming in to play for us. And that's on November 4th, and I believe that's at 7 p.m. too. And that's going to be I think that's going to be kind of a big deal. It's kind of really cool. Our evangelism committee is all over this. They've been working hard on this, and it's one of those things where, I mean, I know it's kind of odd to come back to church on Sunday, it's Saturday night. Sorry, Saturday night at 7 p.m. But it's like, let me tell you guys. Here's the thing. I know a lot of people are out there going, but I don't like the organ. I know that you're out there. I know you're out there. I love the organ, but I understand that not everybody loves the organ. If you have never been to an organ concert, November 4th, just try it out. Just because, to be honest with you, that is what sold me.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I went to my Lutheran church forever and ever in St. John's in Beaufort, Missouri. Loved them. Loved all of our organists. I always thought they did wonderful. But to me, it was just like, okay, this is just the organ, whatever.
Yeah.
When I went to Seward, we had an organist that did concerts, and I actually went to one of them, and it was amazing. It was amazing. Now, he wasn't playing for us to just sing with him. And I think that's some of the deals. He was not, dare I say, it was not practical organ playing. It was concert organ playing. And there is a bit of a difference.
Yeah, of course.
The people that play the organ at St. John's are awesome. They are wonderful. And they do great. This is an organ concert, though, and kind of a concert.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different thing. And but if you've never been, you should come. Just check it out. I'm excited. I'm excited to but it's November 4th at 7 p.m. So you'll hear more about it. You'll see it in our bulletins, all that kind of stuff. But I know the evangelism committee is really stoked about it. I think it's going to be a good time.
Yeah.
So I know I'm pretty excited. This is seriously, this is the time of the year I just love.
Yeah.
The weather's changing, and I love it. I don't like it when it gets super cold, although I can take it. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But it's there's man, I just love the fall time. I just really do.
It's my favorite.
I do.
Favorite time of year.
I know. Me too. Me as well. me as well. But anyway, yeah. So there's, I mean, again, there's just lots of stuff going on at church. Trying to think what else. See, I need those ladies to tell me what to talk about.
I know they'll have suggestions, I'm sure, for you.
They need to. Yeah. They need to email me their suggestions.
Yeah, we should have a little call in.
I wish we could. I wish we could. But it, currently it is 10:20 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Probably not going to do the call in thing.
Well,
but maybe we can do like a pre-thing email. Yeah. For those of you that are listening, and I know some of you, just email me. Ask me the questions. What's going on at church?
Yeah.
We'll answer them.
And same with the stump or not the darn it.
There's no such thing as a dumb question.
Yeah, because we did one weeks back that someone asked me because they were like, I've never, I always wondered this, and it's great to know.
Oh yeah, there's some great stuff that comes out of those.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. I think that might be all the time that we have for tonight.
Yeah,
unfortunately, it's so sad. It's so sad to end the show.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you everybody for joining us this fine and wonderful. I was going to say evening, but maybe you're listening to this in the morning. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know when you're listening to this. But anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. God's blessings. Bye.
Bye.